up, Warriors of Light? I'm back, and this time with a build I wanted to make since the launch of the game, a powerful one-shot mage worthy of the title Black Mage. At the beginning I was somewhat disappointed by the not-so-stellar performance of different mages compared to Sage or melee jobs, but finally I made a Black Mage build that really feels powerful and scary. Thank you for supporting the channel and these videos, and if you like them, consider subscribing and checking the rest of my content. Our Black Mage Hades revolves around using their most devastating spells such as Flare and Meteor. And to reach my goal of one-shotting bosses, it is probably one of the most affinity-intensive build I have created so far, and sadly requires lots of luck in attaining the affinities it requires. So much so that even I don't have all the items and sets for it to just fully appreciate its destruction. And it still works though. As a warning, this build is an absolute overkill, and you will quickly notice that technically using Flare and Meteor is a waste of resources and unnecessary, as you will be so powerful you could use anything else for the sake of killing anything. But our goal is specifically to be able to destroy bosses from a single cast of these spells. With that said, let's get into it. This build will require you to use both job sets, and depending on your available items and affinities, you have multiple options. Let's go first with the obvious one, the Black Mage. The two mandatory affinities for Black Mage are both 400% Tyrant and 400% Assassin. 400% Assassin for its stacking break damage bonus, and 400% Tyrant for absolute dominion to be able to inflict critical damage on status-afflicted enemies. To explain this a little bit, since the maximum plane damage we can deal is capped at 9,999 as per Final Fantasy rules, the only way we can clear the floor with bosses is if we focus on break damage, and even as a mage, the way to do that is to stack agility and critical damage. Agility, as we know, is not your usual speed attribute, but in Final Fantasy Origin it increases the break damage dealt by all your critical hits, so it benefits everyone. Dealing critical damage is fairly simple, as all you have to do is attack your opponents from behind for a guaranteed crit. But, unfortunately for us, apart from a couple of projectile-based spells, we cannot critical hit with Flare or Meteor. For this purpose, we take the 400% Tyrant affinity. Thanks to it, after we put any elemental affliction on an enemy, as long as the debuff is active, any and all attacks against them from us will be critical, including all spells. As explained in a short video of mine about Black Mage, it is a job that focuses around break damage with all its abilities and passives, and Flare and Meteor specifically are break damage dealing abilities, despite the common idea that they should all be about damage. With all of this, our strategy should be somewhat clear by now. Our goal is to stack as much agility and intellect as possible, inflict our enemies with status ailments, and after buffing up to the 9s, unleash Flare or Meteor for maximum break damage, one-hit breaking any enemy in the game. For this, there are additional affinities I recommend, but having the double 400% should already be enough to deal 80% break damage on bosses. For the maximum effect and build optimization, I think it's possible to achieve 400% Assassin, Tyrant, and Black Mage, with one free slot for 120% affinity bonus, which I recommend for Duelist. All of our 400% affinities grant us both agility and intellect with break damage bonuses and are mandatory effects, while the 120% Duelist will give us additional agility and 20% critical break damage bonus. As mentioned, this is the absolute maximum that is available in the game currently, and will require very good luck for the proper items and affinity increasing through smithing. Now that is for our main job, and don't worry, the second job is a lot less demanding. It just depends on what affinities you already have available. 400% Assassin affinity is a must-have, in order to be able to keep up your 5 break damage stacks even while job swapping. If you can't take 400% Tyrant on the Black Mage, I recommend taking Tyrant for sub-job, for the 30% affinity bonus that will certainly help, and its weapon enchantments also help inflicting status ailments cheaper. If you were able to achieve both 400% Tyrant and Assassin on your Black Mage, on the other hand, I recommend using Berserker for your support job for its Berserk job ability that will give massive increase to your overall damage and break damage. Apart from the 400% Assassin affinity on your support job, I personally recommend 400% Void Knight to gain 50% MP discount on your command abilities, so you can use this build for cheap buffing. And if you're already using Berserker, then the 250% Samurai is very effective for power and perseverance, giving you additional damage boost upon animation cancelling with a job switch, which you can do right after using Berserk. For our commands, we have 3 fixed ones you must use. Seal of Blood to increase the damage of our next spell we cast, but be careful, as Seal of Blood is also activated by Lightbringer, which we will also use. Then Invincibile to increase our critical hit effectiveness and put enemy hate on your party members instead. And finally, Mighty Strikes to make your enemies weak to your Flare and Meteor spells. We also use Lightbringer and not Chaosbringer, as we simply do not have any affinity slots available to make Chaosbringer work with this build. The build also requires you to change and upgrade all your special effects on your items to increase break damage. My recommended special effects are Agility, Non-Elemental Break Damage Dealt, and Critical Break Damage Dealt. I haven't fully tested all the options, but these are the 3 effects that boost your final damage the most according to my attempts. Quick hint, upon upgrading your special effects, make sure to judge if it's actually worth to upgrade them or not, as the final upgrade sometimes only increases by 0.1%, and you really shouldn't waste your valuable materials on that. That is our build. Now let's see the gameplay. For Hades, I recommend using party members to keep bosses away from you. Most importantly, to keep them in one place, as it's really easy to miss the Flare and Meteor. One party member I really recommend specifically is Neon, as a red mage, and if you build her for maximum status affliction, she can help you put debuffs on bosses very easily. Since one-hitting bosses with our black mage requires lots of buffing, including the Lightbringer mode, its setup is a bit intensive and requires you to have at least 5 MP bars with Void Knight on your support job, or 6 MP bars if you don't have Void Knight. The goal is to avoid getting hit by anything, so our Assassin's Final Moment can stack up to 5 while building up our MP with Soul Shielding and Black Mage spells. Once we're all set, the tricky part is making sure to buff yourself up while also having the ability to inflict status ailment on the enemy. This won't always work, as it can be quite a pain in the ass. If you're using Tyrant as your off job, it is easy to apply any of your buffs on your weapons and hit the boss a couple of times. Boom. If not, you will have to weaken the boss with a couple of elemental spells from Black Mage to inflict the status, but you can also call for Neon's help as I mentioned. I have a fairly okay time depending on the AI, but sometimes they can really be just clumsy. If they are afflicted, we are ready to enter the final phase by enabling Lightbringer, as Lightbringer also increases your overall break damage, but also gives you 100% haste bonus on spellcasting. And start casting either Flare or Meteor, and voila! Ultimate destruction through black magic. As I mentioned earlier, it's a very advanced build that requires a good amount of preparation and game knowledge too in order to execute, but it is so satisfying seeing black magic that is supposed to be the most powerful form of magic reach its ultimate potential. While the grind for this build is not easy, I do not regret it, as it's one of my favorite builds already. As a Black Mage main, especially, I've been loving playing as it. Of course, it is an absolute overkill. Once all your preparation is complete, technically any magic would one-shot your enemies, or you could just melee them to death. But our point was always to use Flare and Meteor, keep that in mind. But that is it for our Hades Black Mage build, our ultimate destructive spellcaster. I hope you all enjoyed this insane build at least as much as I, and I wish you all the luck and RNG if you try this build. It's really worth it. If you tried it, please share your opinions and your experience with it with each other, and I would also love to hear all of it. Thank you for your support, everyone. I will be signing off, and as always, I'll see you next time.